Blessings to you, wayward souls. Withering Hollow, England. The bitter winter of 1293. The frost came early that year. It crept across the windows of Withering Hollow like a slow hand, veining the glass with white, whispering of something buried. The village slept beneath a sky the colour of bone, and in 3 homes the letters arrived. So draw your curtains, light your fires, and await the morning's post. Lady Ellen Merrick woke to the sound of nothing. Not the hush of snow nor the creak of timber, just a stillness so complete it felt deliberate. She rose barefoot, the stone floor biting her skin. In the nursery, her child slept soundlessly, but tucked into the folds of the blanket, nestled beside the child's hand, was a letter. No name, no seal, only wax melted into ash, and 5 words scrawled in a hand that bled. The debt is not forgotten. In the chapel, Father Caulfield found his letter nailed to the door. No footprints in the frost, no sound but the echo of wind through the broken steeple. The parchment was damp, the ink running like tears. He touched it with gloved fingers and felt a warmth, brief and passing. The words were the same, but beneath them, a second line. She was not alone. Sir Aldrich Dunwyke, in his manner of stone and rot, also awoke to silence. His fire had died in the night, only adding to the chilling feeling. On the windowsill, a crow lay dead, its beak cracked open, its eyes sewn shut with a thread the colour of rust, and inside its mouth, folded like a prayer, was the letter. He did not read it aloud. He didn't dare, for he knew the words already. They had been whispered in his dreams for years. 3 families, 3 letters, 1 curse, buried a century deep. She who they burned in 1193 had no grave, only fire, and fire does not forget. The letters had no sender or signature, but they carried weight. Not just the weight of ink and parchment, but of something older. Within days of their arrival, the air in Withering Hollow changed. It grew thick and almost metallic. The snow no longer melted on skin. Fires refused to catch, and the silence deepened. Lady Ellen Merrick's child began to speak in her sleep. Not with words, but with sounds, wet and guttural. The nursemaid swore she saw the child's eyes roll back, the whites etched with symbols, and on the nursery walls drawings appeared, circles within circles, hands reaching from beneath the ground. Father Caulfield, once a man of rigid faith, began to hear scratching beneath the chapel floor. At first he dismissed it as rats, a common occurrence, but the sound grew louder and more deliberate. He tore up the floorboards with his own hands, splinters biting deep into his flesh, seeking the source, and beneath the altar he found bones, human, wrapped in a black cloth and stitched with hair. The skull was cracked and the jaw was missing. Sir Aldrich Dunwyke's hounds refused to enter his grand hall. They merely whimpered at the threshold, tails low and eyes fixed on something unseen. Aldrich himself began to dream, but not of picnics in the gardens or wars across the lands, but of fire, of a woman standing in the flames, her mouth sewn shut, her hands bound in ritual cloth. And in the dream, she didn't scream, she just watched. Each family began to unravel. The curse, it seemed, was most certainly not passive, but ritual bound. It had waited for bloodlines to ripen, the next in a long line of payment. The deaths of past generations had been unnatural, and now, in the winter of 1293, Mosoil was ready to receive its penance. 3 weeks had passed since the letters arrived. The snow had not melted, the sun had not risen properly in days, only a grey smear behind clouds that hung low and unmoving. They met in the woods at dusk, though none had agreed to it out loud. An unspoken promise, I guess. It was as if the forest had summoned them each one by one. The path was not marked, yet each of them knew it. Lady Ellen Merrick, cloaked in black, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Father Caulfield, his hands raw from digging, his breath shallow and sour. And Sir Aldrich Dunwyke, gaunt, his sword left behind, his boots soaked in something he refused to name. The trees grew denser as they walked, the branches bare but slick with something darker than frost. The air was thick with rot, not fresh decay, but old and fermented. Only the sound of soil shifting beneath their feet, as if the ground itself resented being stepped on. They arrived at a clearing that none remembered from childhood, though all had heard it in whispers. A perfect circle of trees, their trunks blackened and their roots exposed like veins. In the centre stood a stone altar, cracked and bleeding silt. Around it, the earth felt warmer, not from the sun, but from something beneath. Father Caulfield knelt first. He whispered a prayer, but the words came out wrong, twisted somehow, reversed, as if the air refused to carry them. Lady Ellen touched the altar and recoiled. Her fingers came away, damp though the stone was dry. And Aldrich said nothing but stared at the ground, where something writhed just beneath the surface. They did not speak of her, not yet, but they all felt her, like a breath on the back of their neck, a memory they hadn't earned. The ritual had not ended in 1193, it had only paused. And now, in the final days of 1293, it was once again waking. The trees leaned inward, and somewhere deep in the hollow, silently and secretly, something began to dig its way up. The forest did not release them, though they had left the clearing. The trees almost seemed to follow them, leaning closer. The soil clung to their boots like wet skin, and the air just tasted of iron. That night, Lady Ellen returned to her family's vault, led there by dreams and memories of whispered secrets. It lay beneath the manor, carved into the bedrock, sealed with iron gates and prayer. She hadn't entered since her father's burial, and the key was cold in her hand. The lock resisted, partially seized with time. Inside, the air felt wrong. Not stale and cold she had expected, but warm. The torches flickered, though there was no wind. She descended past shelves of relics and past portraits with eyes following her movements until she reached the final chamber. And there, in a box carved of bone, lay a heart. It was not mummified, but it wasn't rotted either. It pulsed faintly, wrapped in cloth stitched with symbols she didn't recognize. She tried to lift it, but her hands blistered to the touch. She screamed, but the sound did not echo. The vault swallowed it. She did not return to the manor. The next morning, Father Caulfield found her body in the chapel. He sent word for the others and left until their arrival. She had been moved from her vault, placed on the altar, arms folded, eyes blindfolded with ritual cloth, mouth sewn shut, and soil packed into her chest cavity, where her heart should have been. No one saw who did it, but the altar was warm and the bones beneath had shifted. Sir Aldrich Dunwyke did not speak. Unable to find the words, he stared at the body and then at the sky, which turned the colour of bruised flesh. He knew what may come next. New Year's Eve, 1293. The snow had stopped falling. The village was silent. No footsteps. Only the sound of soil shifting beneath the weight of the frost. Father Caulfield and Sir Aldrich Dunwyke returned to the clearing. Ellen's death had not been buried. It had been placed. A message, a warning, a piece of something unfinished. The heart still pulsed in its cloth wrapping, carried now in a box of iron and salt. Caulfield held it with gloved hands, and Aldrich carried the blindfold. He did not speak. Words began to unravel. Language felt brittle, and even prayer tasted sour. The altar was waiting. The soil around it steamed, though the air was cold. They began the reversal spoken of in old family tomes. Each family's the same. The heart was placed on the altar and the blindfold laid across it. Soil poured in a circle traced with blood. Aldrich's blood, drawn from a wound across his palm. Caulfield whispered the rites over and over, though the words came out in reverse, syllables folding in on themselves. The ground trembled and the altar cracked, and she rose. Not from the soil, but from silence. Her form was not flesh, not shadow either, but something in between. Her eyes were blindfolded, her mouth sewn shut, her hands bound in cloth stitched with symbols. Aldrich stepped forward. He knew what was needed. He did not plead or beg or pray. He offered. She reached for him. He did not die quickly. His body was folded bone by bone into the soil, but not buried, absorbed. The earth drank of him. The altar pulsed and the blindfold vanished. Father Caulfield fell to his knees. He did not cry, though he tried. He whispered her name, Meredith. She turned toward him, and then she was gone. The clearing emptied, the soil cooled, the sky opened, but the altar remained, and Caulfield was alone. January 1st, 1294. The new year had arrived without celebration. Father Caulfield stood alone in the clearing. The altar cracked, its surface scorched. The soil around it had cooled, and the trees no longer leaned. But the silence remained. He did not pray. He did not bury the dead. He simply watched. The heart was gone. The blindfold was gone. But something had been left behind. A single tooth, pale and sharp, resting on the altar like a relic. He reached out, but it crumbled to dust before him. He knew it would return for him. It was owed. Back in the village, the chapel doors hung open, the pews were overturned. No one came to mass. No one spoke of Ellen or asked about Aldrich. The curse had ended, yes, but not with forgiveness. It ended with remembrance. And in the wind, when it finally returned, there was a whisper. Not a voice, not a name, just a sound like soil shifting beneath stone. The hollow had remembered, and it would not forget again. And there the tale ends for now, but the echoes will always remain. If you've enjoyed your stay here in my domain, leave your mark, a review, a whisper, a 5-star sigil. Until next time, wanderers, I've been Fauna Blakewell, and you've been changed forever.